gotta turn it on. And then if you just make sure you're kind of in the front, in the middle here. Yeah.
Test.
Do you want to pull up that saying?
Oh, yeah.
Hi, everybody.
Okay. I think we're good to start. All right.
Cool. My name is this one? It's kind of fuzzy. Okay. My name is Chris Wiltsey, and I work for Bike Utah. So a few months ago, me and Molly were meeting, and she was asking me if I knew of any funding opportunities to pay for a consultant to do an active transportation plan for your community. But I was just wrapping up a few projects, and so I offered to do the project. I'm kind of like a free consultant, I guess. So to give context, if Bluff was to pay for something like this, it would be like maybe $30,000 or $40,000, but you're getting it for free. So yeah. But I run a program called the 1,000 Miles Program. A few years ago, Governor Herbert added or set a goal of adding 1,000 miles of what he termed as family-friendly bicycle infrastructure. So I help communities throughout the state. We get funding from the state to do this program, and I help plan out and find funding for these types of high comfort, high safety, family-friendly bicycle facilities. But this plan is going to cover both walking and biking facilities, specifically hard surface. Next slide, please. So this is basically the different phases of the plan. Early on, we talked about, okay, what are the basic parameters of this plan? What are the basic ideas that we want to discuss and pursue? So some of those early ideas are we're focusing on hard surface, so we won't be doing like mountain bike trails or soft surface dirt trails. These will be paved or on-street facilities. And then now we're at the point, the second part, which is partner and public engagement. So we want to hear from the community. What do you want from your plan? What do you want in terms of walking and biking? What would make your community feel safer? So one thing I constantly heard before I started this plan was like the crossing to the school. That was like a big thing that I heard a lot of people were concerned about, kids crossing there. So that's like a good example of something that we could plan for. And once it's on a plan, then we can go look for money. We can go get grant money because they want to see that line on the map before we apply for grants. And likewise, if we're going to get UDOT to build things along the highway, then we also need those lines on the map. And then after we get your input and all of your ideas, I don't necessarily have like pathways that I want because I don't live here, but I want to be like a mirror for all of you guys and reflect what you want for your community. So that's the idea of this plan, is that you're telling me what you want, and then I'm going to put it into the plan. Next slide. So once we create this plan, we're not going to just like make a plan and then you don't have any input. So along the way, you'll be able to give input about the plan and tell us whether this actually reflects what you want for your community. And when I talk about high comfort, high safety, family-friendly bicycle infrastructure, basically what that means is the facility or the intensity of the bicycle infrastructure should increase as the number of vehicles and speeds of those vehicles increases. And so an example of that would be on a neighborhood street where people are not driving that fast. We just want to perhaps reinforce those speed limits that already exist. So if the speed limit is 25 miles per hour, that doesn't mean that people actually drive 25 miles per hour, right? So we can plan for things that will help make the streets self-enforcing, so we wouldn't necessarily have to have like a police officer there all the time. We would be able to design the street in such a way that people actually drive the speed limit, and it makes it safer for everybody. And or we could think about things like, how do we make our streets even more beautiful? I went for a walk earlier. I think I saw you guys maybe driving. I don't know. Yeah, so I went for a walk, and you guys already have a ton of assets in your community that make it really beautiful and really nice to walk, that I think a lot of communities would be really jealous if they knew you had it. So how can we capitalize on some of those assets you already have in your community that make it such a wonderful place? So that's at kind of the slowest speeds, lowest number of vehicles, but then as it increases, so let's imagine like your downtown kind of area, maybe along the highway, we want to make those nicer places to walk. So something I hear somewhat regularly is people are concerned about tourists walking across that bridge, right? So that could be something that we plan for. How do we make it safer? I stayed here a couple years ago, and I was one of those people who like walked it at nighttime, and I was like running across, trying not to get ran over. So I get it. And then finally, at the highest speeds, so along that highway, there might be sections where we actually want to put a multi-use path, and that increases the separation even more. So where the speeds are really high and there's lots of vehicles traveling there, we want to increase that intensity. So I have some pictures really quick. Next slide. So a bicycle boulevard, this is kind of the idea where you have these features where I say sort of jokingly, the more people are afraid of scratching their cars, the slower they will drive. So there's a few different strategies of how you can slow cars down. You either raise up the ground, so you've probably seen like speed bumps or speed humps. That's one way. That's called vertical deflection, because you're deflecting them vertically. Or horizontal deflection is like a roundabout, or another way is just narrowing the road. So those are kind of the three main ways that we slow down traffic. And those are sort of low intensity kind of features, because you might just put them at an intersection or at a place where lots of kids cross. You wouldn't put them everywhere. It'd just be in appropriate context sensitive places. Next slide. And then at the highest intensity, so along the highway, like a UDOT road, we would put these multi-use facilities, or maybe there's a rural road where a lot of people like to ride bikes, and it's not very safe because cars are driving through and they don't see people. So we could put one of these like paved facilities. We often refer to these as multi-use paths. So an idea a few different people have talked about, when I met with some of the students yesterday at the school, they talked about how they would like perhaps a multi-use path going out to 5 Points. So that would be like a good example of where we could put a facility like this, just to put it out there so the kids have somewhere to ride, and people who ride recreationally would have somewhere to ride as well. That would be safe and away from cars. So, and when I say these things, I'm just trying to give you ideas to get your thoughts churning, and any ideas you have, we're open to hearing about them. Okay, questions? Okay, so what I want to do, if you've seen back there, there are some maps, and then there are some sheets over there. That sheet on the wall, it says, what do you want to see in the plan? I have some sticky notes. So maybe you don't know exactly what you want, but you have sort of like big ideas, like I want to be able to feel more comfortable while I'm walking. You could put that on a sticky note, and you could put it on that sheet. There's also a suggestion box if you want to do it secretly. Like you want to say something real spicy, you could put that in the suggestion box. And then also there are the maps where you can actually draw lines, like, and then you could label the lines like, I would like a path out to here, or I would like a safe crossing here at this street to get to school, perhaps. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's a great comment. So I guess a couple things. Mark them on the map so we know where you're thinking all five are. And then there's a few different strategies for improving crossings. So like I was saying, you can kind of narrow the road, and what that does is it slows down cars, and it also narrows the distance that people have to walk to cross the road. It also puts the pedestrian out further. So instead of the pedestrian standing on the sidewalk and sort of sprinting across, it actually puts them out further so that they're more visible to cars. There's a lot of different strategies that we can use. And as part of the plan, if that's a priority for you, we can list best practices and best strategies that are like tested and data driven, so we know that they actually work. Okay. Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, so you mhm. Yeah, I mean, we could definitely plan for those kinds of things. Oh, his question. What kinds of sort of design principles can we expect for crossing the highway? UDOT actually came out. So UDOT runs all of our state roads. So most of our highways, they actually came out with some design principles recently that are pretty progressive in terms of, or at least compared to what they had before, that are very much around traffic calming. So some of these things that I'm talking about are actually in those design guidelines. So it means that something that UDOT will actually consider now. Underpasses and overpasses would be a consideration. Potentially, we can definitely plan for all of these things and put them in kind of a buffet of options that we can use where appropriate. But I think definitely talking about some of these concerns and these ideas, this is the time to do it so that we can put it into the plan. Yeah. Okay. Mhm. Yeah. And those kinds of things, make sure to either put them on the maps or put them on there or the suggestions just so I have them. But yeah, I definitely agree. I'm definitely of the opinion that um, this is your community and people who are driving through are visiting, and your goals and your comfort should be the priority as opposed to them being able to drive as quickly as possible. So I'm with you. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, yeah, exactly. I think UDOT can make some exceptions for 1 mile, right? Any other questions? These are great. Thank you.
Cody, okay, he says, as a business owner on Main Street, I'd like to see whatever needs to happen to slow traffic to 25 miles per hour.
Raise your hand if slowing traffic on the highway is a priority for you. All right, let's. Let's plan for it. Okay.
And everyone online. Kirsten.
Our highway also incorporated a pathway of, I don't know what kind of waste it was, but it was being transported through. I don't know if that's still the case, but is that something that could be taken into consideration, knowing that there's hazardous material that sometimes comes through town as well?
Yeah. Well, this plan wouldn't necessarily. I'm imagining you're perhaps imagining like a diversion, like a road that would maybe not go through town. Okay.
These things are less likely to be problematic.
Yeah, for sure. These are definitely things that we can consider. Because I think sometimes when we think about walkability or bikeability, we think, oh, if there's a sidewalk, then it's walkable, or if there's a bike path or a bike lane, it's bikeable. But it's so much more than that, right? If I put a sidewalk out in the middle of the desert with no trees, that's not quite as walkable as putting a sidewalk under some trees, right? So there's all these different things that we can consider in this planning process. If that's like a priority, like you really want a lot of more trees in your community, that's definitely a suggestion you should give, because these are all different things that make your community more walkable and bikeable. I think it was Mulberry Street I was walking down. That street is amazing. It's so beautiful. And I imagine like in the springtime, it just feels so nice to walk down it. So if you want a Mulberry Street where you currently live, let's talk about it.
And we have another comment online from Cody. Cody, if you want to unmute yourself.
I would just like to say that, first of all, I believe that I saw Bike Utah give a presentation at the UGO conference in Moab, Utah, and you guys were super impressive. So thanks for being here today. I would like to mention and make it voice that it's important for these pathways to be ADA accessible.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good input. If anybody else has something else that you feel like maybe is like a niche concern, I would definitely still share it. Somebody else in another meeting talked about how they wanted to consider like best practices with the ecology. So like animal crossings, they felt like there was a lot of animals getting hit by cars. So that's something we're actually going to do a whole section looking at best practices around that to see if we can maybe mediate some of those problems. So anything you want, I'm here for you. Okay.
Okay. Chris, sorry, would you, or I can, yeah. If you could repeat your question for just those people online, that would be great.
I mean, I just think I used to do civil engineering and design these things, but you need a light right at the school where the buses come out of the driveway and turn onto the highway and are not pressured by the speeding cars coming by. Plus, a light there would allow for people to cross. You don't have to build a bridge or an underpass. I mean, it seemed a little simpler, and nobody seems to be talking about that.
Yeah, those are definitely things we can consider. Sometimes things like stoplights can be a little more difficult just because UDOT has certain requirements that we have to meet to get lights, and lights can be kind of expensive. It can be like $150,000 just to put in one of those lights. We could put in something like an RFB, which is called a rapid flashing beacon. Not always super awesome, but I think just depending on context, but basically it's a button that you press and then it flashes and signals to people that they need to stop. And since the highway, as you were saying, is not that wide, it might actually be a good candidate for that. We can look at all these different things. We're still in like kind of the discovery phase, that very early phase where we just want to get like, what values do you want to see manifest in your transportation system?
it does seem like there's different levels of intervention. So the best thing to do is to understand what the problem is,
Yes.
and then we can adjust to those different levels of intervention. I think someone else here.
I was curious what they do in Cottonwood Wash so the kids can get to school. Would it be, yeah, I was just curious about that. Do you have any ideas? Have you been thinking about that yet? Talking about, I'm sure you have.
Conwood Wash, which part is that? Oh, the bridge.
The bridges, but, so you're probably thinking expand the bridge out. I was thinking of going down through the wash and cross the way the kids walk through it now.
Yeah,
It's a bike path.
I don't know how that would work ecologically, like if that would kind of mess things up, but we'd have to look at that. That is definitely one of our priorities because that's something that everybody has brought up that we've talked to. So, yeah.
There was another question over here, I think. Gentleman over here. Did you have a comment, sir?
Sorry. Yeah, I was telling her.
Oh, well, it's just so that they can hear online.
Okay. I think it would be helpful if we had signs, just like you have a sign for there's deer. There's a farmer driving a tractor across a field or ATV, maybe within about 30 miles, all the roads in this area. So a lot of people that come through town, the truckers are pretty good, but the worst people that get close to me when I ride the bike are the RV people. But if it's in their head, hey, there's people that might be riding the bike. I'm not just out in the middle of, people think they're in the middle of nowhere and they're on their phones. So that would be an easy thing to be helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And make sure to put these on the sticky notes of the suggestion. Okay, cool.
Are there any other comments?
Sir.
I was just curious, is this standard practice on the designs you showed up there that the bicycle traffic and the pedestrian traffic are on the same trail, the same path? It seems like in the larger cities, they've had to take the bikes and give them their own lane because there's a little bit of an incompatibility between bicyclists and pedestrians, sometimes particularly in the evenings. So would this be a common trail that then would be shared by everyone?
Yes, that's a great question. So oftentimes in like an urban environment, we refer to what you're talking about as like a cycle track, and then you'd have a sidewalk. So you might see that in like Europe or Copenhagen pretty often. There are some examples here in Utah. It's just more expensive, right? But on a lot of these like multi-use trails, like you saw in that picture, those can be 12 feet wide, so they can be very wide. And you can have a lane that's specific for pedestrians where they can jog or walk with strollers, whatever. And then you'd have lanes going in either direction for the bikes. So that's pretty common what we're seeing across the state. Any other questions?
Are there comments online? We will have an opportunity to fill out with the folks online a sheet with people's suggestions. So we'll be doing the same exercise that is going to happen in person on the sticky notes and the map, also online, and I'll be running that portion.
And if this seems like a lot right now and you're just kind of wrapping your head around it, we have a survey that you can take a little sheet, and then you can take that survey later once you've thought about it if you need to kind of chew on some of these ideas. So you can give your suggestions there. It will also have a map that you can draw lines on if you have things that you want to suggest specifically on the map, or you can just write out your thoughts in the survey. And remember, there's always the suggestion box if you feel like your idea is controversial. So don't be shy. Any other comments before we go work on the maps? Yes, sir.
Looking at some of the options that have been presented there, I think we've got a real small population here. And some of these things really pertain to a larger city with a lot more people. So it needs to be scaled accordingly. We can't have a 12-foot bike path when somebody uses it like once a day. That seems a little bit over the top of what might be envisioned happening here.
So I guess to give some context, is anybody familiar with the governor's new trails initiative? Okay, yeah. So Governor Cox, he's an advocate for rural communities, I guess you could say, and so he has kind of championed this effort to dedicate 5% of the transportation budget, the state transportation budget, to active transportation facilities. So what that means in concrete terms is every year we'll have $55 million dedicated, and then another 10 million, and there's also one-time funding that's been coming through of like 30 or 40 million. So we're looking at like $90 million this year for active transportation, which is like pretty unprecedented. It's never happened. And then subsequently, we'll have about 65 million every year. And a lot of that's going to go to rural communities. And on top of that, UDOT is going to start maintaining a lot of these facilities. So I guess my point is don't be shy. This is like a very special time for these kinds of facilities. And these are the types of facilities that could, like right now, you might not imagine yourself as a community that is a place people come to ride to, but it could be that. And so try to imagine that if you'd like your community to head in a certain direction that's related to these topics, this is the time to talk about it. Ma'am?
We walk around town a lot. I find that walking on the interior streets is fairly safe. It's easy and safe. It's the main highway.
Okay.
And since most of the businesses in town are on 191, if we want to walk out there, that's where it's scary. Okay. And so I think a lot of sort of energy and effort ought to be put into making that a walkable, bikeable place, a safe, walkable, and bikeable place.
I agree. Yeah, so definitely provide this feedback in one of the ways. But yes, I definitely agree.
Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity. And then, yeah, we are the person who passing the bridge every morning and every afternoon with 2 kids, and the huge truck is passing with 40 miles. So that's every day. We kind of got, my younger one is really scared every morning. So I really appreciate if even just a speed down, that helps us a lot, and then save the kids. So that's really important for us. But then my question, so then, yeah, that's the biggest concern. But my question about for the kind of a dream plan, it's another topics, and then maybe it's too early stage, but if you could like inform me about like a material choice, for example, like a asphalt or concrete or paved gravel, maybe there's so many like a visible surface that we can imagine. But for example, for bike or for pedestrian, for walkers, or so what's the trend of the material, or if you can inform something, it would be great.
Yeah, kind of the current best practice, I would say, is concrete because it lasts the longest and it's nice to ride on and walk on, whereas like asphalt, right, it starts breaking up after 10 years, 20 years. And there's more maintenance there. So we're probably looking at concrete, but we can dream. So I don't know, there's places in the world that will use like bricks or like some sort of a cobblestone. And what that can do is that can signal to drivers that they should slow down. So we can think about these different materials, and there's creative ways of creating walkable and bikeable environments that aren't ways we generally think about.
Realize the demographics are important. You know, you could ride the bike to Monument Valley. It's, I'm trying to remember, about 45, 50 miles.
I've actually done it, yeah.
Pretty doable. From here to Moab, pretty doable. I've ridden from here to Dove Creek, about 86 miles, easy. Not easy if you're in the wind, but I guess what I'm getting at is more than just the community here to attract business and tourism. I think it would be really good to connect the dots for people in the community that there is a tax benefit. It would help the business and the hotels. That's what I wanted to share that.
Yeah, so I've actually done another planning effort with San Juan County that recommends we put a bike path from Monticello all the way to Monument Valley. So, and we're actually looking at finding ways of funding what's called a feasibility study. So it's sort of like your early, how feasible is this project? What obstacles might we run into? What do we need to consider environmentally? So there's a lot going on, I guess. And
Yeah. Oh, and if I can add to that, so we also had a community meeting for local organizations and government this morning earlier, and we proposed Bluff as this first phase kind of model program of active transportation. So if we can really get a robust plan here in Bluff, it's a model for the rest of the county, and there's these larger conversations happening with state and government officials and county officials as Bluff is like a kind of a hub or regional. How do we create a regional transportation network where we're connecting to St. Christopher's Mission, or we're connecting to Aneth chapter or Mexican Water? How can we be more accessible to communities around Bluff? So this is a plan for Bluff, but we have larger aspirations to become this more widespread regional active transportation network.
And to Molly's point, really quick, one of the things that's kind of happening across the state is like in Carbon County, a lot of those places are getting away from mining. So they're trying to find different revenue streams. And the kind of model that they're using is recreation or having visitors come. And so to Molly's point, you could be a model for that. How do you create these small rural communities that are very bikeable and walkable places that people want to visit?
They put in a fiber optic line within the right of way from here all the way to Monument Valley. That ground's been disturbed. So why not put the bike trail in there? It's going to be, you're going to have noxious weeds coming up. It's already been done.
Yeah.
In that same spot.
Great suggestion for the suggestion box. Okay, I'll get to you next, Cody. Well, after Tina.
Will grant funding be available for hardscape, like trash cans, picnic tables? Not portalettes, but something a little nicer?
Yeah, so there's the Office of Outdoor Recreation has grants for those kinds of things. So you could get a grant potentially for a bathroom if it made sense, or signage, different things like that.
If those are the kinds of facilities you want adjacent to bike paths, then that's definitely something to include. This is the dreaming part. So we can't say no to anything now because we get to dream it. So if we don't dream it, then it won't happen.
Yeah, and so eventually we'll go through a process of prioritizing the different projects and kind of phasing when we want them to happen. So like, what is the community's top priority? I would imagine it's something around the highway would be very at the top of that list. So, and that's just to say we can have a lot of different ideas and then we'll prioritize them and work through them as they relate to the goals of your community.
I'm just hoping that in the planning, we consider adding some extra parking on both sides of the watch. I mean, my vision is potentially expanded parking in the West Park area. So if there are folks coming through in RVs or whatever, and they want to park and they want to bike and they want to walk, but they're not actually staying anywhere in town, there's a place off of our town roads where folks can park on both sides of town.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And that's definitely one of those ideas of like something that could contribute to walkability or bikeability. Because if you have parking lots everywhere, it spreads everything out, kind of makes it less nice to walk. But if you can concentrate them, like you're saying, on either end, then you can have really nice areas in between. So yeah, thank you.
And Cody, if you want to just unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. I guess my first comment is that I heard Monument Valley mentioned a couple times, so I'm curious. How does Monument Valley feel about that? And my next question is the goat heads. How far do we plan on people riding their bikes before they get to deal with that?
Yeah. So part of this trails effort, if the funding did come from UDOT, is something that's also unprecedented is that they're going to start maintaining these active transportation facilities. So theoretically, they could be taking care of a lot of these goat heads and making sure that it's not getting overgrown and spitting out goat heads all over the path. So,
but it's already that way. Like
Sorry?
that's the battle. You're going into that battle already.
Yes, and so UDOT would be maintaining those facilities, so it wouldn't be dependent on the town of Bluff.
And I love the idea of connecting the communities through bike paths and walkable paths, but at the same time, I ask again, well, how does Monument Valley feel about that? And are they included in the discussion?
Yeah, so the Monument Valley planning effort, that's beyond the scope of this project. That's just a different project that's kind of happening currently, and they would be engaged definitely through that planning process.
I can also tell you, Cody, that we have been sharing with Blanding, Monticello, and some of the chapter houses that we want to undergo this. They were invited to this meeting, but also I've been sending them resources about what we're doing here and asking for feedback.
And they have their own process.
That's beautiful. Good.
Are you feeling okay about this? Okay.
Are there any other online, I'll come back. Are there any other online comments? I also posted a shared document here for comments. And then in a second here, we'll get to the Post-it note activity and the drawing map activity. And the Scan Me QR code is a link to the survey for online folks. And there's also a link of the different maps that you can draw on as well. So when we separate groups, I'll work with the online folks and Chris will be working with the in-person folks.
In kind of hearing the various comments, it seems like for the plan for Bluff, we need to be forward thinking about some of these other thoughts of this connecting between Monticello, Blanding, us, Monument Valley. And be forward thinking on that, how we lay out what may happen here in Bluff, that it's kind of geared towards that possibility. Because if it did happen, I think that kind of a route could be very attractive to a lot of people besides the people here in Bluff. If we're looking towards that end, not only taking care of our needs here in the town, but I think those needs in our town would be taken care of along with this forward thinking.
Yeah, so I was the one who did the planning effort for the Monticello to Monument Valley, and the way that we did it was we phased it so the communities we prioritize the infrastructure around the communities first, and then the spaces in between are second priority, because we want to make the communities safe first before waiting, I don't know, 10 years to do the whole thing, right? So we want to get the communities done first. So this is in some ways an extension of that planning effort. So we're that first phase of making the communities safe and bikeable and walkable. That's hopefully what we're doing right here during this planning effort.
If anyone online has a comment before we split into groups, you're more than welcome to unmute yourself and go ahead. Okay, I think we can probably split into groups now.
Yeah, is everybody, oh, sorry, man.
Said, I'm on the economic development, the county, the board, and having a feasibility study for the whole county really makes sense. I know they've done, I think they're actually starting with Spanish Valley and the LaSalle Loop. And then we can join that, but we can really focus on what Bluff needs.
Yeah, one of the big issues right now that we'd be running into as far as doing that feasibility study is they cost probably $300,000 to $500,000. So, whereas this planning effort is free. Well, I mean, free to you. Is everybody feeling good about this? You're not like walking away being like, who is this guy? You're feeling okay? Okay. Yeah, if you have any concerns, definitely put them in the survey or the suggestion box or sticky notes. Yeah, let's separate now, and we can work through some of the exercises and get some of your ideas and thoughts down so I can incorporate them into the plan.
How long do you estimate that it will take to come up with the sort of a draft plan that you will then present to the residents for their input?
Yeah, so we're looking at summertime. So maybe if I can't remember exactly what was
said
on
about the mid to end of August, but there's an active transportation like stakeholder group if you're interested in being part of, and we're going to meet probably monthly until then to get drafts and review them of the active transportation plan that Chris and Bike Utah folks are going to be putting together. So there'll be multiple opportunities to see the drafts before it gets finalized into the final draft or into the final document.
Yeah, I guess this is personal, but my wife's having a baby in July, so it might be crazy. So, but we'll shoot for sometime in summer or early fall.
And then the plan is to use that to start applying for construction and implementation grants. So as soon as the plan is finished, we're going to be doing some pre-planning before that to get ready to apply for grants. And then once the plan is final, we'll be applying for grants for construction and implementation. Okay. Thanks online folks for your patience here. So I put a document here in the chat, and I can share my screen. Let's see. 1 second. The online group. Okay. So, okay. So I've got this document here, and if you could just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Oh, great. Thanks, Cody. And so the activity that folks here in person are doing is they're answering these 2 questions with sticky notes. What are your values and what types of projects represent those values? And if we want to go through together, we can do that exercise here in this space, and I can record your answers. And then there's a QR code that I was sharing earlier with a survey and also some maps, and you can mark those up and submit them through the survey, or you can send them to me, and I'll put my email in the chat here. But if we could just start with, what are your values? Maybe, I don't want to, the best way I found to facilitate this is to call on names. So I'm going to do that. I can give you a second to kind of think about these questions, but it's the best way to kind of get people's feedback right away. So maybe Cody, since you know how this works, you could kick us off with talking about some of your values, and then we can go down the line.
Okay, sure. I guess I'll start by saying that I'm trying to get over it, but I can't. But ADA being niche is really bothering me. That comment kind of bothers me. There's members of our community that have wheels, and I believe that this active transportation plan, our tiny town, it's not going to be very long, so it should be able to accommodate those types of folks. And we have a pretty good aging demographic of people in Bluff. And I hope none of them heard me, but they know what I mean. And it's all been discussed before. So my value to my point is it's all inclusive. And I gotta go to the kiddos, so I'll listen on the phone, but
Okay.
I gotta get my kids.
All right, thanks, Cody.
Yeah.
Tim, I don't know if you can unmute yourself, and we'll hear from you. And Irene, if either of you would like to share what your values are, what's important to you about this plan.
Molly, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I'm not sure I have a lot of good input, but what I would like to say is that you guys have presented a lot of great information, and I want to thank you for that. Okay, that's it.
Okay, Tim. Irene, is there anything that is important to you that's included in this plan or that represents your values?
Let me put Irene on. She's here. Irene, listen to this. Would you go ahead and ask Irene again?
Sure. Hi, Irene. So we're just trying to kind of gather some input about what your values are, what would be important to you to include in an active transportation plan.
Well, I've always thought it's good to be like a pedestrian-friendly community. I've lived in places where they weren't, like Farmington, New Mexico is not a pedestrian-friendly place. And so it's nice to be able to walk around town in a community. Those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Irene.
Yeah.
I second that.
Brian, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I'd probably start by seconding what Cody said about accessibility not being a niche topic. That's a pretty big deal to me, is about, and it ties into my values of just like sort of equal accessibility when we build these projects. So for me, these conversations about linking our place being sort of a central hub that is part of a larger project that reaches out to other communities is really important to me, because I think that, I'm an avid biker. I'm always I bike commuted for years in the city that I lived in before. For the last 10 years, I've been a bike commuter every day, and That's really empowering experience to bike and to be able to move yourself through space like that. And I think it's not something that we're all afforded. Like it's, you know, I've been very privileged to have lots of nice bikes and been athletic and had, you know, just the opportunities to allow me to be in this place. So for me, my values are mostly about just like, how can we make this accessible to everybody, not just us?
Yeah, I definitely second that, Brian. That's important to me too. I don't know if Kate is also there with you, if she wants to.
Say connecting communities together, which was sort of.
Sorry, Kate, it's a little
Yeah,
hard.
Kate.
Could you get a little closer to the mic?
Yeah, she's coming. She's running up the stairs. She's coming now. 1 second. She's almost here.
Don't hurt yourself.
She's very close. She's arrived.
Don't fall.
No, it's okay. I just, I really like what everybody's saying, but I just wanted to say, which I think has already been said, but just really reiterating that connecting communities together, because we are all, there are a bunch of small communities in this area. And in a lot of ways, we are very separated from each other because the only way to get from one to another is by driving mostly. And so I just think it would be amazing to be able to connect together in different ways. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks. Let's see, who else do we have on? Dan, do you want to go next?
I can. So we'd had some of the conversation in previous meetings. I'll kind of maybe reiterate some of the things I covered earlier, but I think what everyone has said so far definitely relates to Josh and I. We were both listening. Definitely on board with the niche, not the ADA accessibility, not the niche. You know, that's something that's very important to our community. And like Cody mentioned, that's going to become more and more important as we do have an aging community. As far as what's important to me on the plan, you know, the first value is really social justice and equity. And so, yeah, it's nice to have good trails to work out on and have for leisure, but some people, it becomes a lifeline. And so how can we promote that one within Bluff? You know, we have neighbors that are pretty close here that there's not a safe way to get into town, you know, if you don't have a car. And so as we look out east, you know, how do we expand opportunities there? And that's what we kind of talked about, even maybe looking at the bridge again, the swinging bridge, if that was possible. Then additionally, it's just getting around town. So, you know, like Eileen's mentioned, we love just being able to walk around town, walk to the post office, to grocery stores. And so, you know, we're lucky to live in, you know, everyone's kind of got their pockets where they can walk to something, whether it's East Bluff or West Bluff. But it'd be nice to be able to connect all of that together so that when our kids are at school age here in a couple of years, we can safely walk to the school. Here in Heroku, we talked about that and how Coney is like scared of crossing. I mean, that I could totally see that, and that just sucks. Third thing is just being able to have some recreation opportunities and exercise opportunities kind of in the immediate area. So trails around town, connecting the river trail. And then the fourth one would be expanding those so that we could have trails to go farther out, ride our bikes to Combe Ridge, you know, through the Bluff River Trail, or maybe a trail that goes out, you know, to Butler Wash. How amazing would that be? And then I know we have bigger bike. I've heard some people talking there about you know, going to Dove Creek. My gosh, but even just expanding and making that more accessible even to the local area would be amazing. Thank you.
Dan, you said Jocelyn was listening. Does she have anything, or is she busy with Alma?
She's in there with 2 kids. Did I miss anything? Jocelyn? Did I miss anything? Did you hear me? She kind of mentioned before, I think, the things that I mentioned, especially definitely on board with the accessibility of that as well.
Okay. Debbie, I see that you're online. Is there anything that you'd like to say? Go ahead, Debbie. You have to unmute yourself, though.
Okay. Can you see me and hear me?
Oh, yes, we can hear you, Debbie.
Okay, I was reflecting on what people were saying about accessibility, what I completely agree with. I thought I would make a comment that we who work with the Bluff River Trail, we have been working with the Historic Preservation Association, been working with BLM and the BLM Partnership to make the Sand Island route accessible. I'm grateful to the BLM Partnership for helping to make that happen. But that, I hope, is only the beginning. The other parts of the Bluff River Trail that I hope can become more accessible. But if they're kind of daunted by the potential cost, so if we can get help with creating more accessible parts of the Bluff River Trail, I would be very grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. And this is an editable document, so if I'm missing or misinterpreting something, please feel free to edit live.
Okay, I will.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Sorry, Debbie, I don't know if I fully translated your thought in that document. Aaron, I see that you're a host. I don't know if you're also listening in, but if you have any input, we'd love to hear it. Okay, so I guess people started to kind of answer. We talked about values, and now we need to translate some of those values into specific projects. I know Dan started talking about some connections that he wanted to see and maybe bringing back the swinging bridge connection. Are there other thoughts? Maybe you can start with Cody again if your kids aren't distracting you too much.
No, sure, I'm ready.
Yeah,
I'm ready.
If you have a specific project in mind, please let us know.
I was thinking about how Bike America crosses comes through Bluff every year. And maybe instead of just watching on the sidelines, hoping these people don't get hit by cars, maybe the active transportation telling this new bike plan can help those folks out. And then maybe it's a way that Bluff can capitalize on that.
Awesome. I didn't know about that event. That's great. Let's see, Tim or Irene, do you have any specific projects that you'd like to see happen in Bluff around transportation and walkability? Oh, so I think you're on mute, Irene. If you could start over.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I have a memory of a river crossing by the gosh, it's just there behind. It's a little below the Cottonwood Wash drainage. People crossed the river there long before there were bridges. The river would freeze over even in the winter. People would cross the river even in the winter when the river would freeze over and they put sand on the ice and then ride their horses across. So, well, in storytelling we talk, there were trails that people traveled, travel long distances, and then some of our modern highways follow those follow those trails. So maybe, just a historical acknowledgement of some of those trails that existed before settlement.
I love that idea. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Irene. Brian, is there a specific project that you'd like to see in Bluff?
One thing I really like is the idea of helping people learn how to maintain and work on their own bikes. So I think that's a concern that comes with owning a bike, right? Is its maintenance. So I think like I would love to also see, with trying to increase infrastructure for biking, helping people also do that. So projects are like, whether that's like a free bike shop or community bike space, or that's kind of a different, slightly different track. But Kate's here too, and she has one.
Awesome. And to let you know, that's not off limits. We're
Cool.
working with Bike Utah to accept a whole, I think maybe 20 or 30 bikes for the kids at the school. And we're just trying to figure out where we're going to store it. But part of what goes along with this project is programming. So how can we connect with different organizations to do bike workshops, or UNHS has really expressed interest in providing helmets and safety classes.
Amazing.
Yeah, so having places to store bikes is actually something that we need to include in our plan as well.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, as the person who just graduated nursing school too is going to start a career here in that, there's a whole public health aspect to getting people out on bikes too that excites me about this.
Yeah, I totally agree. Kate, what do you got?
I was just when I was listening to Irene, it reminded me of the swinging bridge, which used to exist across the river. Just I guess that would be, I'm trying to what direction? Just east of town, and that got used a lot, and then it got swept away in a flood, and it wasn't ever rebuilt. And that brought a lot of people from the res across the river into town. And so to me, that seems like a sort of in line with Irene's comment that's just like one specific thing I thought of as bringing that back as a viable path, like pedestrian path for people to use again. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's see, who else is on the call here? Let's see, Tim or Irene, did you want to say something else?
Tim, Molly, there's this event in Colorado called Ride the Rockies. And I believe it's a week-long bicycle ride through the mountains. And I'm not sure of the distance, but they make a big loop, tell you ride up through those mountains up there. It changes every year. And this is long-term thinking, but what are the possibilities of Southern Utah having some sort of event like that where you bring a lot of people in, maybe to ride the Navajo Nation or the edge of the Navajo Nation. It would be a great event for people that are really into bicycling, and also a great event for the town of Bluff. It would bring a lot of people into town for lodging and things like that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. It's a long-term thing, of course, but okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tim. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility at all. I know that a group called Navajo Yes, they did like a whole big like relay bike activity event that was all across the reservation. I think it started in Utah and ended in Arizona. So I think there are definitely a lot of organizations that would be interested in in an event like that, and they would probably be interested in supporting our effort here too.
Molly, this is Cody. Have those organizations been reached out to? I know there's lots of others, the name mountain bike companies now, and Navajo, yes. So I know there's lots of different organizations like that now, and I'm wondering if they can be roped into this.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, Cody. I've only had time to reach out to a few, including Navajo, yes. But if you have any suggestions, like the Bike America or even like AmeriCorps, once we actually start building trails, if you have ideas about partners, that would be really great. Or if anybody has relationships with specific people that could get us in touch with other people. I know we're working with UNHS closely and keeping them in the loop on this project. So yeah, if you have ideas of partnerships, please either write in this document or follow up in an email to me or include that in the survey.
Cool, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Dan, you're up.
So there's some immediate things I don't think I've heard talked about yet. That I think there's definitely some public safety concerns along our roads now. Like if you think right outside the Design Bluff campus, there's that giant culvert that has like a street level, concrete kind of lip. And of course, there was some love to like walk right on the lip, but we were just walking out with Brian Gaines. It's like you look down, it's like 8 feet the drop. And there's a lot of little spots out like that around town where it's like, maybe there should be a guardrail there. So I think we probably need to think about some of those immediate safety things. And then a few other things I'm thinking about is I like that Cody brought up the race that comes through here already. Thinking about other things that are going on, like there was always the Huff to Bluff, which was the marathon from Blanding to Bluff, and I guess there's some talk that maybe they'd happen again. So getting feedback from some of those groups of what they would need. And there's also the random marathon that always is happening inside Bluff, like every fall. All of a sudden we wake up and there's like 200 people going down Cottonwood. I don't know what that is, who does it, but it'd be interesting to hear from them. What their needs might be. And then the other immediate projects, I think, are what everyone knows of crosswalks on the highway. It'd be great to be able to go across to Cow Canyon Trading Post, or even go over to Bluff Dwellings and recapture. I think that stuff would be really important. And then getting across the wash to the school. You have anything? Yeah.
Abby, do you have any specific projects that you're interested in seeing happen in Bluff?
I would really like to complete the Bluff River Trail. We are about 75% finished. That's it.
Thanks, Debbie. Let's see. Does anyone else have other ideas or want to give their input? Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Sorry, I'm in transition. One other thing I meant to mention was I think it'd be awesome to try to complete the loop, River Trails, the South Loop of Bluff, start working on the North Loop, which would be up Cottonwood Road on the west side, and then hopefully looping around the Utah Wildlands purchase on the Guyman property, then back down, across Sitla Land and Jennifer's property.
Yeah. Yeah, Emerson agrees. Sorry, I didn't totally catch the whole thing. Would you also complete the survey?
What's that?
Would you also do the survey so I can make sure to get that loop?
Okay, yeah. Let me take a look.
Okay, thanks. I can put the QR code up again. 1 second. Okay, so here's the QR code for people to take a picture of, and then here's the link itself.
Hey, Molly, I have a quick question. Sorry. I don't know if I heard this talked about, and I'm sorry I've been in and out, but once this is complete and things are kind of starting to be put in motion and these plans are developed and then eventually this comes to fruition, is there a plan for communication of these assets to folks who are traveling through the area? Because, you know, as locals, we may know that there's these trails and these connections and these things, but our visitors may not, and that would be an important part. So I don't know if there's like a communication plan on signage that would be included in this. Yeah, and I think that was part of, I know this is more like the active planning of that, but I think it's an important piece to the overall, you know, the end goal. So I just thought I'd ask. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, it's Irene. Um, what's the expression? I'll be the devil's advocate. So, you know, you create a trail, and we all know that there are off-road vehicles, right? And how do we how do we how do we create boundaries? How do we create boundaries that well, they're not going away, but do we create boundaries for trails and usage? And I'm just throwing that out, you know.
Oh, I was just gonna say thank you for the work and for the conversation, and we're gonna log off. But I just wanted to say look forward to participating in the future. Oh, all right. Gotta pass my boards next week then. All right. Bye bye.
Awesome. Thanks, Molly, for your effort. You're killing it.